Namaste everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host Kushalmehra. Time for the monologue of the month. So before we start the monologue and I share my views on the topic of today, I am going to start by giving a shout out to all the new members of last month. So thank you very much for the support. Anand Sridhar, Ashit KS, Pramath Malik, Aryan Jaiswal, Kharbuja Singh. That's a lovely name. Govind Keshav Das, Ramashankar Nair, John Doe, Deepak Khulve, Aniruddha K, Maddie 7485, and Curry Puff. All right, so you guys know the rules of the game. The monologue always goes like this. I start about a topic, I speak about usually 20 to 25 minutes, and then I will look at your comments. When it comes to comments, I reserve my right to answer what I want to answer. All the super chats will be answered obviously first. So if you want your question to be answered on a priority basis, please use the super chat option. If there are no super chats, could be, I will pick and choose what I want to answer from the live chat, and then I'll wrap things up. So before I do that, let me just give you an idea of what I do over here. So obviously you guys know you get the live streams and you get the podcast and everything. You can even go to the audio channel on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, whatever. Other than that, if you want more content, so there are two ways of getting more content. So on every Saturday from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. I do a new series which is called Understanding and Experiencing Religion. Now, if you want to get to that, you have to either become a member of the Speak With Me tier on YouTube. So basically, you go on YouTube, you click the join button and join. There are two options. There's a Seekers tier and there's a Speak With Me tier. So if you join the Speak With Me tier, once a month we do this AMA behind the scenes. It is not recorded or anything. It's just I chat with the supporters of the channel. If you don't want to do that, then you can obviously go on Patreon, and on patreon.com you can pledge anything from $1 to whatever you want to pledge. And there I've been doing a book discussion series. So behind the scenes we record sessions, we go through books. So till now we've done 6 books and I think 3 or 4 papers. So all the content is available behind a paywall. So you can do that. And if you pledge $5 and above on Patreon too, then you get not only access to the book discussions, but you also get access to the Ramayana series. So having said that, let's start the monologue. I usually don't have notes for the monologue, but today I had to write things down because what I'm about to talk today has a lot of people, names, concepts, which I think I might have to read the names and the concepts carefully. So I just wrote them down on a Word document so that I can read them and then I talk about it. So today's monologue, as you guys know, the topic was how do we study religion. So now when I say how do we study religion, what I mean to say is when you pick up a religious text, right? So what does text consist of? Text is made up of language. It's words that they are jumbled up together in a certain format, which after that is supposed to make sense, and we're supposed to make sense out of point A to point B. But how do we study religion? How do we understand religion? And the key in that is religious language. So how do we decipher religious language? So let's take a very, very basic example, right? Now, there are religious verses where you will hear words like, a universal Purusha has 1,000 heads, let's say in the Hindu context, right? A Purusha has 1,000 texts or 1,000 eyes or 1,000 feet, or XYZ has lived for 60,000 years or 1,000 years. Or in a biblical sense, let's take Jesus was, he was the resurrection and he's the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, stuff like that. Now, how do we read religious language? So obviously there is a Western way of understanding religious language and they had their own discourse, and then there is an Indian way of learning religious language and understanding religious language and religious meaning, basically. So let's start with the Western context. So in the Western way, there were 2 ways of understanding religious language. So one was called, what they used to call it, the univocal way. So what is the univocal way? So univocal way is the way where the context, so let's say, so the primary meaning for Western philosophy and Western religions were, everything was about God. So let's say, do they carry the same meaning when they talk about a human being and a God? So does the context matter or the situation matter where the word it's being used? So I'll give you an example, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say we use the word kind. Now, when we use the word that human being is kind and God is kind. Now, does that mean that how we express a human being is kind and how we express God is kind? Are we supposed to take the meaning of the word kind in the same way in both cases? Now, if you're a univocalist, which there were some univocalists in Western cultures, they said we're supposed to take them the same way. So it means that the word kind used in the human context is the same as the word kind used in the context of God. But then the problem is that if we are attributing the same predicate and the same meaning to God as well as a human being, we run into a lot of problems. Now, to deal with these problems, the same people in the West, they came up with another way, which was called the equivocal language way. So what was the equivocal way? So that position basically states that there are words that are used in a very specific context depending on the meaning and the situation in which that word is used. So they used to talk about it in multiple senses. So let's say one sense is called, what they used to call it, a homonym. So what is a homonym? Where the word actually refers to two or more things. So let's say we use the word bat. Now bat can be used in a cricket, like a cricket bat. And obviously, bat, COVID, everybody knows what a bat is, right? That's one example. Now, another way was, let's say, let's use this line, for example. When we use the word like, how do we express the word light? Now, the light could be used as a, light, as in, when we talk about light being thrown on objects, like a physical property, or light can be, used in multiple ways where you're just throwing some attention, throwing light on a subject or something of that sort. So that is why the equivocalists would disagree vehemently with the univocalists. So according to the equivocalists, it can't be the same as the univocalists claim, because and every time every single word would have different meanings. They said that every situation has a single unique sense, but they would also run into multiple problems. And to solve that problem, it's a very unique thing. They extended it to the concept of what in Western philosophy is called via negativa. And this is all in subject to God, because you eventually run into many issues in the equivocal way too when it comes to explaining things in the term of, expressing God in terms of human attributes like kindness, throwing light upon things, or etc., etc. So eventually what they did was, to solve this problem, they said that God can only be expressed in a negative way, which is, in philosophy, it is called via negativa. That's what it's called. Now, there is a perfect parallel to this in the Indian school too, and that is the school of Advaita Vedanta. So if you remember, in Advaita Vedanta, there is a concept of Neti Neti from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So what does it talk about? It talks about the nature of the Brahman, right? So it is not this, not this. So it is formless. It's without this, it's without that, and without that. And that's how they dealt with the problem in Advaita Vedanta. By the way, I can tell you, as a disbeliever, that the safest argument if you are a believer is actually only the negative God. Because if you say God is not this, 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 which is the via negativa or the Upanishadic Neti Neti concept, then there is no rational rebuttal to that God or to that Brahman. So only thing that you can say is that I don't know. to that particular reality. It's not like you've proven that reality, because you also say it is not this, it is beyond your senses, right? So that's the one thing. So the most famous proponent of equivocal languages in the West was Maimonides. He was a famous Jewish rabbi. I think it was 1135 to 1200s or something. That was when he was alive, and he came up with this equivocal language. Now, to deal with the problem of equivocal and univocal, there is another way of looking at religion. They call it the analogical way. The most famous one who came up with the analogical way in the West was Thomas Aquinas. I think he was born around 1225 or something. Thomas Aquinas came up with this analogical way. Basically, analogy is used in language to show the similarity or maybe likeness between two entities and descriptions. Again, because according to Aquinas, the purely negative way of understanding God was not good enough. So he tries to strike that balance. In Indian philosophy, also, some other darshanas, unlike Advaita Vedanta, did come up with a very interesting concept. So Indian context, where they used to say words have two meanings. One would be the literal meaning, and the literal meaning in Indian philosophy used to be called vakayartha. That was a literal meaning. So literal meaning would be used when you want to express something or explain something in a direct way, like a literal way. And then when you run into a problem where the direct way or the literal way cannot be used, they would have the word you explained in a secondary way. Now, what was that secondary way? The secondary way in Sanskrit was called the lakshayartha. That was the secondary way. Now, I will give you the secondary way. Best example, we are all cricket fans. So Sachin Tendulkar is a god of cricket. Now, this is not the literal meaning. We can't use it as a vakayartha, right? We have to use it as a lakshayartha. Now, what is being tried to portray here? That it is not that he's a literal god, but we are using God over here as a metaphor to explain the extraordinary abilities of Sachin Tendulkar. That's the lakshayartha way, not a vakayartha way. So this was there. Then coming back to Aquinas again. So according to Aquinas, the analogical way, the analogical language way is basically done in two types. He used to say one is attribution and the other is proportionality. So attribution would be to explain the attributes of God. So let's say God is A, B, C, X, Y, Z, or in a human example, you can say it is like he is healthy or medicine is healthy. Now, is he is healthy the same as medicine is healthy? No. In both cases, healthy cannot be used in the literal sense. It is in a causal sense. You see what I'm trying to say over here? It is like a cause. Now, in proportionality, it is about explaining attributes and giving them some sort of a quantified way. So let's say we are trying to say human beings, man and women, are supposed to be faithful to each other. And a dog is a very faithful animal. Now, are we trying to say that both man and women or dog are equally faithful or similar? No, we're just using this analogy. That is what analogical language is. And we are creating some sort of a proportionality here. So these are the three primary ways. So like I said, the three primary ways of understanding religion in the West were equivocal, univocal. So first was univocal, which was the literal meaning. So whatever is used for God and whatever is used for human beings is literally the same. Equivocal is not the same. It has certain connections with going down to the via negativa description. And then the analogical way, which the most famous proponent of that was Thomas Aquinas. In the Indian case, when it came to the equivocal way, there was obviously the via negativa or the neti way of the Advaitins. And to oppose, on the opposition side of the Advaitins, some other darshanas came up with the idea of the vakayartha and lakshayartha, where they had the literal meaning and which is the primary meaning, and then there is the secondary meaning. Now we have covered this basic layer. Now let's go into the second phase. Now we'll deal more into Western philosophy and Western thoughts. Now there was this heavy attack on religion at a point of time from a school called the logical positivists, or you can call them the Vienna Circle. They were called the Vienna Circle. Now, logical positivists, so I'm going to read a quote from David Hume. So these people primarily, I think, started in the 17th century, or maybe 15th century to the 19th century. You can say that period was the period of the logical positivists. And in them, the most vicious attack on religious language came from a philosopher scholar called David Hume. So David Hume said something very interesting. So I'm reading a quote of his. He said, if we take in our hand any volume of divinity or school metaphysics, for instance, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning concerning quantity or number? No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning concerning matter of fact and existence? No. Commit it then to the flames, for it can contain nothing but sophistry and illusion. So basically what David Hume is saying is he's rejecting religious and metaphysical works, primarily just calling them sophistry and illusion. It's very interesting that logical positivists primarily were inspired by a Western philosopher and scholar called Wittgenstein. Now, what is interesting is that Wittgenstein is basically built into two parts. There is early Wittgenstein, which comes from his work, which is called the Tractatus. And then there is later Wittgenstein, which is on the language game theory. The fascinating part is that the language, logical positivists used early Wittgenstein to reject religious language as totally meaningless. So in Tractatus, again, I'm going to use a quote of Wittgenstein here. I've kept it on the Word document. So Wittgenstein in Tractatus had said, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. And in the same line, then he says, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. So basically, he's saying that there are certain limits in religious language, and because religious language has these limits, we should just discard them and call them nonsense. So that was the logic of the logical positivists. So according to logical positivists, there are only two kinds of there can be only two kinds of propositions. One is an analytical proposition, or one is a synthetic proposition. So analytical proposition would be literally your logical or mathematical things like 3 plus 3 is equal to 6, or 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. And in the case of a synthetic propositions basically when you are deriving meaning from, let's say, your sense experiences, like the wood is hard, grass is green, there is a railway track on this side. And in that category, they say that religious language basically makes no sense. So it is all nonsense according to them. Obviously, then in that there were two famous principles called the verification principle and the falsification principle. The most famous proponent of the verification principle was A.J. Ayer, and the most famous proponent of the falsification principle was Anthony Flew. So I'm not going to get into that because you guys will be bored with the verification and falsification principle. And then what happened was, then came the reply to all these logical positivists. And one of the most famous replies to the logical positivists when it came to religious language and how do we study religion actually came from Wittgenstein. Again, this was late Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein had completely changed at an individual level too when he was studying religion and studying philosophy and language and meaning and many more things. So he came up what he called as a language game. So his concept was that you can use similarities between various uses of language and you can put them in the context of a game. So what he says is just like there are varieties of games, there are varieties of utterances in linguistic usage. So, and all those usages are fit by a set of games. So just like a game is predetermined by rules. So let's say football has certain rules, cricket has certain rules, rugby has certain rules, language has certain rules. So in his game analogy, what he was trying to say is that a participant's view of the game would be different from the view of the observer. So for his point of view, that religious language should always be viewed not from a verification or a falsification point of view. Rather, religious languages should be viewed from this language game point of view, where maybe what the believer is trying to say and maybe what the disbeliever is trying to say are not fitting in the worldview, is because the believer is coming from a different set of rules and the disbeliever is coming from a different set of rules. So we should not be obsessed about the meaningfulness of religious languages and beliefs, but we should be looking at them, more at the metaphorical way. Like it does not matter in many cases. Obviously, this also had many problems. Another famous rebuttal was by R.M. Hare. I think he was an English moral philosopher, and he used to call this. He had, I don't know how to pronounce it. It was like BLIK. I don't know if it's called bleak or blick. I don't know what he says. So I'm gonna again. So according to him, a blick was an unverifiable and unfalsifiable interpretation of one's experience. So I'm going to read his quote. He says, "It is by our blicks that we decide what is and what is not an explanation." Again, it is very similar to Wittgenstein, where he's trying to say there are a certain set of rules, but what he's trying to say that religious people have a religious blick. So they have a religious point of view, a religious worldview, and they interpret religion from that particular point of view. And that's how we should look at religions. So this is basically the entire, 20 minutes summary of religious language. I'm trying my best to give it to you in a concise format, but I want to leave you guys with some personal views of mine. Now, I have been a personal student of religion for more than a decade now. I have read multiple translations. I have read multiple translations in multiple languages. At least when it comes to Indian religion, I try to read it as much as I can. I do my best. Like whenever I try to read the Bhagavad Gita, I will read it in Hindi and English. I am comfortable in Marathi too, so sometimes I will run a few verses up in some Marathi translation also, because I'm fair. When it comes to reading, I can read the Devanagari script. So, and I'm familiar with Marathi. Yeah, you guys can judge me. I'm a Punjabi, but I'm comfortable in Marathi. Well, I was born and raised in Maharashtra. They taught me Marathi in school, so I am comfortable in Maharashtra and Marathi language. So I usually study religion in 3 languages, which is English, Hindi, and Marathi. And what I found was that the literal meaning is a flawed way. So when I'm saying the literal meaning, I'm going back to what I've said in the beginning, which is the univocal way. So the univocal way is the wrong way of understanding religion. Religion has to be, in my view, I think, how the Hindu grammarians and the analogical way of language, I think that is the most sensible way of understanding religion, in my personal view. I think in some cases there are literal meanings which is crystal clear, where the god or the pandit or the Maulvi or the Baba or the Swami is literally giving you an instruction, and you can understand it from a context. That's why it is very important to read. When you're studying religion, you cannot read one verse. You have to read few verses before and few verses after, and then you get the context. And once you get the context, then you can apply which is literal, which is metaphorical, which is equivocal, which is univocal, which is analogical, which is vakyartha, which is lakshayartha, which is analytic, which is synthetic. You can do all these things later on. But if you don't do it, then I'm sorry to say you are studying religion the wrong way. And this is no apologia for religion. Even if you study religion by this framework of applying these rules, I think you have sufficient scope to criticize religion and to like religion, depending on your flavor of the day. So if you're a believer, you will find a lot of problematic things in religion, but you can still take away a lot and ignore the rest. I don't know about Muslims and Christians, but as a Hindu, I can tell you that I recently ran into this problem. Obviously, I'm not going to take the name of the person, but this is someone who is, having these Ramayana discussions with me. And that person told me that he or she is suddenly realizing that there are some things that are problematic in our scriptures. We are obviously doing it behind a paywall. We are having very serious discussions, and we don't hold our punches. When we see a problematic verse in the Ramayana, we take it head on and we talk about it. And obviously, this person had a very romanticized image of religion, and when they actually studied it, it kind of hit them, it shook them. But it's fine, and now they're comfortable with it. But my whole aim is that you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to religion, but you also don't need to be an apologist when it comes to religion. You can actually, this is how I study religion. I look at religion as an anthropological exercise. I look at those books. I don't see them as divine texts. I don't see them as texts which are written by some God telling a prophet, or Rishi Munis going into high deep meditation states and finding out some great truths. No, these are people of that time. They were writing things. There is a lot of profound wisdom in those books, and we should learn from that. I have always maintained that my ethical code is Krishna's Nishkam Karma and Mahavira's Anekantvad. I have never shied away from saying that. Yes, there is a little bit of Peter Singer, there is a little bit of Epicurus, there will be a little bit of Maimonides too. I find Maimonides, the Jewish philosopher, very interesting. Plato too. But the point is that we need to read these books as anthropological texts written by people of the certain era. And when you read them and study them in that particular way, I think we can take so much out of religion and we can reject so much in religion that it will lead to a better life. This is my way. But obviously, most religious people will not agree with me. They will be like, no. And then what do these religious people do? They try to use the fallacy, which I call the no true translation fallacy. They'll start questioning the translation. They will use one verse literally when it suits them. They will use one verse metaphorically when it doesn't suit them. While I'm agreeing that there is the rule of using it literally and using it metaphorically, but that has to be judged and defined in a very logical way. And that way is the way I told you guys today. There are certain ways of doing it, and there is a history in Western and Indian philosophy of how do we interpret text. In fact, there is very famous theory called the Sporter theory. In fact, in Indian philosophy and Indian epistemology, how does a word build? And how does a word actually, get segregated? Maybe one day I'll do a dedicated monologue to just to the Sporter theory in Hinduism. There are many ways we can understand these things. But unfortunately, religious apologists are just religious apologists. They are always going to be. And one final word on neo-atheists too. They are actually the copybook image in many ways of cutter religious apologists. Because they also want to follow which way? The first way I told you guys. The first way was what? Again, it was the univocal way. There are two people who use religion univocally. One are neo-atheists, militant atheists. The other are crazy religious people. Those two people take religion literally. I believe religion can't be taken literally. It has to be taken literally depending on the context and understanding of the text. At sometimes it has to be taken in a secondary metaphorical way depending on the context of the text. One more important point, and then I'll wrap it up, is another thing that I feel is very important when we read religion is we should read religious texts in a chronological way. Like, let's take the example of the Rig Veda. Now, people think Rig Veda is 1 to 10, so I start with 1 and finish with 10. No. There is an internal chronology of the Rig Veda, where even by the Western Indologists, I'm not talking about Indian Indologists, Indian studies experts, but even in Western Indology, there is something called 2 to 7 are the old books, which are called the family books. And then 1 and the rest, 8, 9, 10 are the new books. So if you were to read Rig Veda, I believe that you should read it chronologically. By the way, you should read 2 to 7. Now, if you want to go even deep, even further down, then you can use, which I believe personally is the most accurate chronology explained by explained by someone called Shrikant Talagiri. Talagiri has explained his chronology of the Rig Veda. I would recommend all of you to follow Tadagiri's analogy, where he starts with 6 and then he goes down in a different way. And then he explains how 1 actually is spread all over. So there are few verses of 1 that can be taken in the early books. Then some verses of 1 can be taken in the middle books. And then some verses of the 1 can be taken in the new books. That's how you read the Rig Veda. Then you will actually understand how their thought changes, how their language changes, how their points of view change. And you can actually see the development of a society over a period of 1,000 to 1,500 years, because in my view, that is how long it took to compile the entire Rig Veda as it stands today. Similarly, if you're at Abrahamic religions, I would recommend you read the Quran too in a chronological way. Once you read I made the mistake initially of reading the Quran just as it was written, and it made no sense. Sometimes you have a Meccan verse, then you have a Medinan verse in the next chapter, then again he goes to the Meccan verse. I was not understanding it. But then when I read a few scholars of the Quran, and they explained there is a chronology inside the Quran too. Like, okay, there is a Meccan phase and there is the Medinan phase. And when I started reading it according to their chronology, as per their scholarship, I was like, wow. So the God of the Quran conveniently changes statements from a historical point of view when the situation is changing from point A to point B. So that was my experience. So I would personally recommend, even when you're reading religions, if there is an internal chronology, please follow the internal chronology too. The chronology is usually decided by the structure of the language. So the more archaic verses of that religious text are usually the older ones, and the more refined and the more structured ones in terms of modern language structures are considered the newer ones. If you are studying religion, I would recommend please do it that way. No compulsion. You can always do it your way. If you find it too tedious or too boring, like itna kaun kaam karega, please go ahead and read it in a standard way. No big deal. But I'm just giving you the entire rigmarole. Anyways, I have touched the 32-minute mark. So as always, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to start chatting with all of you. All right, let's see. Why doesn't India have such debates? That would help BJP countering fake news. What debates? Are you talking about the Biden versus Trump debates? Well, India will never have that. You can forget about that. My opinions on principles of Arya Samaj. You're talking about the 10 principles. Originally, I think there were 15 principles and then they changed it to 10. Some are good, some are okay. Nehru is our godfather. He is not my godfather. ले हारिस, हिंदी में बोलो यार. हिंदी में क्यों बोलूं? फिर साउथ इंडियन कैसे सुनेंगे भाई? Okay. Reading non-fiction books is very time-taking. There is so much to comprehend. How do you guys approach them? Do you take notes and just read it casually like fiction books? You just read it casually. If you have any... So here's what I do when I'm reading, because I don't read fiction. I go to sleep if I read fiction. I usually read non-fiction. So what I do when I'm reading non-fiction is I just take photos of the pages that I like and I make folders of those books in my computer. Usually I put them in a computer. And then when I want to refer to them, I go back to them and I look at those photos. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, right? A Muslim would interpret the Quran from his beliefs, but an atheist would keep in mind that it's written by humans looking at the historical context in which it came, like a rational interpretation. You'll be surprised how many rational interpretations of religions were done by Muslims too. The most famous example of rational interpretations of the Quran in the Islamic world are by the Mutazilites. So there you go. Mutazilites were also trying to interpret the Quran. Obviously, they had the scholastic philosophy, and the Greek philosophers had a great influence on them. So I think you'll be surprised. Okay, what what can one do about the fact that people on the non-left excessively romanticize the past and realize how the 21st century is better than their supposed golden eggs? It's a disease. It's a disease. Well, I always say this, Shrij. People with a shitty present always come up with an imaginary past. That's a lot to do with what some people on the non-left behave like. Having said that, we should always acknowledge the good things of the past. What happens in India is the left negates every contribution of Hindu society of its past, and the non-left negates every bad thing of Hindu society from its past. The truth is somewhere in the middle. We should go with the truth. Vishnu Bogu, thanks a lot. Indic traditions are very diverse, and oral traditions and practices like yoga, darshana, and siddha, for example, also have a lot of value. So fixation on the book as such, there is in the West, is not there. There is no fixation on the book, but there is still fixation on rituals and practices and habits, right? So you still have to explain those rituals and habits. It's not like they've not explained it. So even in the yoga, right, there are those yam, niyam, whatever, your 8 rules, and then the sub rules within those 8 rules are there. So it's not like they have not written it down. It's not like that. So you can't say there is no text or there is no word textual obsession or word obsession. There are there. But yeah, I get your point. Don't you think even traditional interpretations of text can be sometimes be quite biased because of their own beliefs? Well, they can be, but how do you know? How do you understand the bias? That's the thing. How do you qualitatively and quantitatively come to the conclusion that there is a bias in a particular text in the way it is written? So I'll give you an example. Let's take, will you accept this case as a bias? So if there was an Islamic invasion in India, and how do we know about it? Lo and behold, all the Mughal court historians wrote it themselves, right? How do we know about the brutality of Islam in India? We actually have to just go and read the Chachnama or the Ani Akbari or whatever. Every Mughal king had a court historian who would write, oh, we waltzed over so many people, we killed so many kafirs, or we waltzed over so many temples. So would you use the same logic of bias? Because I have read many of those historical texts where they say, oh, we killed thousands or millions or whatever. How can they? Was my question. Have they killed them? Absolutely. But the numbers are always exaggerated by everyone. So you take that exaggeration. Obviously, even in religious texts, I gave you a classic example of 1,000 heads. Or even in Ramayana, many times they say, oh, this person lived for 1,000 years or 60,000 years or 6,000 years. Obviously, they did not live for that many years. So what they're trying to do is, I would say, I would use the secondary meaning, the Lakshya Artha, not the Vakya Artha. And I would say what they're trying to say is that it was an aged person. That's what I would do. Because obviously, if I take it literally, it makes zero sense. Literally zero. Like, how can someone live for 60,000 years? That's impossible. Or is their definition of a year different from my definition of a year today? Like 365 days? Then we get into so many things. And then we'll have to check their definition of a year again. So, like, Hindu texts were very precise when it came to defining a yuga. Like, they were very precise. They would define the yuga is these many kalpas and stuff like that. They were very precise. How do you think they came up with the age of the universe? And it was actually surprisingly very near to the actual age that science says, which is between 13.1 to 13.9 billion years. It's very funny. I think even Carl Sagan spoke about it in the Cosmos or something. Okay, Anand says, my view on understanding religion is the way we look at evolution by natural selection. Conserve religious philosophy that works and throw out what doesn't and evolve beyond it. I agree. I think I always like to use the word Michael Shermer uses, that there is a moral arch, and the moral arch keeps on expanding and expanding and expanding. And as and when our moral understanding keeps on improving, we keep on changing as human beings. I would agree with you. So as of now, according to our moral understanding, certain things are okay, certain things are not okay. I'm sure in the next few years down the line, when lab meat will be so cheap and so available with without any problems across the world to the 9 or 10 billion people across the world, I think 100 year down the line, human beings will be like, what the hell were these morons doing? Why were they killing animals to consume meat? They will say that about us. So in our case, obviously, we have expanded the moral arts and we have extended that empathy to all living species. Eventually, all of us have. Not that we don't have vegetarianism today, but can we extend it even further? Yes. So that's one example. So yeah, I agree with you. Let me go up. Amog, okay. Have you considered studying Eastern religions like Zen Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism? If yes, any insight into their peculiar? Zen Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism, I've just studied the basics. I think Confucianism, what I found, was very obsessed with order, like society and respect your elders. Elders ki sunni chahiye, that kind of a thing. Taoism had that yin and yang thing. And Zen Buddhism is fine. Like Zen Buddhism is okay, but I think to understand Buddhism, it's much better you go to the early roots where you understand Hinayana, Mahayana, then what did Vijnana Bhikshu say, then what did Nagarjun say, what is the Chatushkoti system. I would recommend you go that route. Then going this Zen Buddhism says this, and Dzogchen says this, and then Tao says this. I think if you want to understand Buddhism, I can speak there very comfortably. If you want to go with Buddhism, just start with Hinayana, Mahayana. Why did they separate? Then they had this concept of the Buddha did not speak about, I think, 14 things which he called the Avyakritas. That 14 things he did not give an answer. So original Buddhism was what? We don't know about these 14 things. But did the Buddhists stop? No. They gave an answer for all the 14 things. Later Buddhists, not Buddha. Buddha said, Mala maiti nahi, but mait nahi. And the other ones, they went on and explained everything. Then even there is this term that they call dharmas, and even within the sections of Buddhists, like some say there are 72 dharmas, like attributes or something. Dharma is not the dharma of Sanskrit. Like dharma are like attributes or something. And then somebody says, no, they're not 72, or it's like 43 or 48. And they like bhav and abhav or something of that sort. They had those bhav wale and abhav wale. So you have to go to another level if you want to understand that. So Shantanu says, of all the darshanas, why is it that the Cārvāka darshan has the least amount of text and the maximum amount of criticism? That's a very good question, Shantanu. Simply because they died. They are dead. They were hedonist materialists who only wanted to live the good life and do nothing else. So what do you think is going to happen? Ask yourself this question, Shantanu. Why do atheists always... Imagine, atheists tend to reproduce far less than theists, right? How you agree on that? Now think like that and extend that logic to Cārvāks too. Imagine if an ideology exists in the past and that says that khao piyo, ash karo, mauj karo, just eat, drink ghee, take loans, live your life to the fullest. What do you think was going to happen to them? They were obviously going to die down. So that's why I always say, whatever we know about Cārvāka darshan is only from a point of view of a Purva Paksh. We literally don't know what Cārvāks themselves said. There is no first-hand account. So whatever is written about Cārvāka should be taken with a pinch of salt. But obviously we can accept a lot of things the other darshanas say. But yeah, there are not some pretty things said about Cārvāks in multiple texts. Like Mahabharata has very nice things to say about them. So Chetan says, I'm currently more invested in Hegel and Freud. Chetan, best of luck. It is all booga booga. New atheists have an us versus them attitude. Yeah, I agree. Not all of them, but some of them do. Some of them do have that attitude, and that's what turns me off. How do you bridge the gap between the memes and the actual religions? I think actual religions are memes themselves. So how do I bridge the gap? I didn't get your question. What is my opinion on the RSS, an organization that is needed in a country like India? What do you think of postmodernism, post-colonialism creeping into the non-left? Very problematic. See, I have always been, this whole reversing the gaze business that's going on in the non-left is nothing but post-colonialism rehashed without telling anyone. They thought if they use Edward Said and did not tell anyone, nobody will find out. There are a few people, I don't want to name them, who use this booga booga because that's what it is. Look, you want to say the invaders did bad things to you? You don't need post-colonialism for that. It's right out there. You don't need post-colonialism. You can call balls and strikes without being, a jackass, which is what post-colonialism is all about. It's just a load of rubbish. It's using flawed ideologies out of postmodernism, and it's just a load of rubbish. I don't use rubbish if I want to criticize the Islamic invasion of India or the British rule in India. I have objective facts which are right there. I don't need this rubbish of post-colonialism. Oh, everything is relative. That's all nonsense. Okay. Will I ever take Diksha from a Paramparik Guru and do sadhana, or are you going to stay textual only? Well, I have meditated a lot, if that means anything to you. What is the difference between Lingayats and Cārvāks? Lingayats are 12th century atheists in South India. But are Lingayats atheists? Aren't Lingayats believers? Lingayats are an offshoot of Shaivism, right? In some weird way. Can you suggest some books on India's history? I've done this many times. I'm not starting it again. Which religious text should I read first in Hinduism? You can start with the Mahabharata and Ramayana. What is my plan forward for the channel? Any new collaborations? Nah, I'm not interested in collaborations. I'm happy with what I'm doing over here. Check out Siddharth Warrior's channel. I don't know. Can a book as of now be presented as Smritis in the future? Absolutely. That's what Hinduism is all about. You junk the old Smritis, take what you want to take from them, make a new Smriti. Then after a few years, junk that Smriti, make a new Smriti. That's what the whole aim was. Should India encourage decolonization like the West? Should places named after Mughals and white supremacists be renamed? Should religious structures built to establish hegemony be broken and given to? Well, you should. Obviously, it depends. I mean, if there is a Dara Shikho road, then I would not have a problem with it. If there was Aurangzeb road, I would have a problem with it, because by every objective standard, Aurangzeb was a jackass. If there was a Ghajni road and a Ghori road, I would have a problem with it. I think that should be changed. If there was a Winston Churchill road in India, I would have a problem with it, because he caused the Bengal famine that killed millions of us. So yeah, beyond that point. But I think it's a complex issue. It's not as simplistic as you take them all out. I have a nuanced opinion about Akbar. I'm not very anti-Akbar. I think Akbar can be divided into 2-3 phases. Maybe early Akbar or mid Akbar was very bad, or maybe late Akbar was not that bad. I don't know. Beyond the point, one has to be very open about these things. So I'm not going to put all of them in one box and reject all of them. I think there were some good Britishers too. I mean, I would want those good Britishers to be highlighted. Personally, a lot of people have a problem with Max Muller. I think I don't. Max Muller was an interesting character. I think if there is a Max Muller Bhavan, I really don't have a problem with it personally. Maybe old Kushalmehra would have, but new Kushalmehra does not. I've evolved in that sense. But yeah, it's okay. I think it's not a big deal. Aurangzeb definitely. Uska to sari jagahon se nikalo, sala useless aadmi. I should reach out to more left-wing channels. Why? Why religious people usually don't like to discuss things rationally about their own religion, but tend to do so for other religions? Because they're biased. You've answered it yourself. They always do it. This is perfectly okay. As a history student, I don't take Ram or Krishna as a literal historical figure as well. But still, it doesn't change what they represent for me. I agree. To me, even Ram Mandir matters to me too. I don't see Ram as real or something, but yeah, Ram Mandir is real. Is a civilizational issue. Look, we build our societies around stories. So to all those people, that have that hippie mentality, oh, we will hold hands and the whole world is one family. The world is not my family, because if the world is one family, so many bad people are my family members. I have enough bad people of my own current family, which is India. उनसे तो मैं झेल नहीं पा रहा हूँ. And now you want me to take the theka of all the bad people around the world and dancing around in the aisles and saying, oh, world is one family. No, world is not one family. We are different people. We are very happy with that. थोड़ा बहुत visa रखो चलेगा. What is a rational interpretation? Well, a rational interpretation, Vijay Lakshmi, would be somewhere where certain quantitative standards are established based on certain scientific principles of anthropology, archaeology, and then you can interpret those words. Linguistic analysis can also be done, like you can check the phonemes of the word, and you have multiple ways where you can interpret religious texts. Okay, I'm going to skip a few. All right. Okay. I came to realize exactly what you explained today after being conflicted inside for a very long time. I've been through some shit, but last 3 months have been the most peaceful I've ever been. Well, I'm happy for you. What do you think of Schrodinger, Bohr, and Heisenberg's affirmation of the Vedas in the course of making the discoveries? Look, you have to understand this. Just because some religious verse or some religious text says something, it doesn't mean that they're scientific. Again, I think the best way to explain this was explained by Makarand Paranjpe. I'm going to read his paragraph. I've done it in the past, and I will do it again for all of you. I don't think so anybody explained it more beautifully than Makarand Paranjpe in that article on Vivekananda, physics, science, and his interactions with who was that gentleman? Tesla. So I would recommend you guys go and read that article. Unfortunately, it's giving me too many pop-ups. But I will tell you, the monk who saw religion through the prism of science. All right, you can read that article. Read the last paragraph in that. That's my answer to you. Religious language is not like scientific language. So I'm sorry if you find some overlaps between a religious text and a scientific text, and then you say, "Oh, I got it from there." No, that's not fair, because the scientific method goes through a certain rigor. There is a hypothesis, then you collect the data, then you test the data, and if the data gives you the results of the hypothesis, then you tentatively say it is most probably true, and then you, after a few years, you also have to replicate your study by other people, then you say it is the most probable truth. It doesn't happen with religion. They just said those things. I've always used this example of Ghalib also, asle shahudo shahido. I have given that verse of Ghalib also. And I mean, are you going to say Ghalib was a quantum mechanics guy? I don't know if you guys remember that Shahiri of Ghalib. I don't remember the exact word. It is somewhere in my computer. But I mean, you can't say that Ghalib said quantum mechanics, right? Because Ghalib also has said a very profound thing in one shairi of his. I forget which shairi was. It was something asle shahudo shahido, something he had said. I had mentioned it one of my monologues too, about this whole thing about Ghalib saying this. And it was about the observer and the observation. And I don't agree with this. Look, because you're not going to call Ghalib a scientist. I know none of you would. If you're a Hindu, you won't call Ghalib a scientist. So let's just not get into this. All right. Just imagine the vastness of what we don't know about the universe. It takes a very strong unemotional mind to not fall despair even as you reject any superhuman force. Well, I think there is honestly no real rebuttal to a deistic God. I don't believe in a God per se. But yeah, a lot of people, I think the confidence with which a lot of atheists deal with the deistic argument, there is no rational answer to a deistic God or a via negativa Brahman or a God. Basically, there isn't. So if you want to, fall safe in deism, where deism is basically what? God created the world and then left it alone. So everybody else kept on doing their thing. So you can be conveniently a believer in God and you can follow all the scientific realities of evolution, Big Bang, everything. So basically, what did God do? He did ting, the Big Bang happened, and then everything else was just natural laws. God is not interfering in anything. So that's how it is. The non-left and left should interact more in India. Only then our country can grow. Otherwise, we are in our own chambers. I agree, but well, I can't do anything about it, right? Well, religions do make. I never said there are only interpretations. I believe there are some literal verses, there are some metaphorical verses. I literally said that in the first 30 minutes. But we should understand where the religious text is being literal and where it is being metaphorical. And it is not like the religious people do, where they, wherever it suits them, it is literal. Where the religion will say, oh, love all, then it is literal. But if it is say, kill the disbeliever, no, then it is metaphorical. It's not like that. But even without that nonsense, we can actually say religious and non-religious, both people can agree that there are some literal and some metaphorical words. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. What the hell is this? There is a new theory going around that Abrahamics were derived from the Dharmic religions, quoting Brahma and Saraswati have a correlation with Abraham and Sarah. Oh, please, just stop this. Look, Abrahamic religions have come out of anything, if you want to say, from Zoroastrian thought. They are very influenced by Zoroastrianism, if you want to make that claim. Okay, I'll have to go up again. Do I have a good credit score being a Cārvāka? Yes. Yeah, luckily I have a good credit score, man. That's one thing. When I take a loan, I pay it back. Mughal historians and religious texts are different. You can spot bias, for instance, by looking at a contradiction in a traditional using mental gymnastics in his interpretation. Again, why do you have to read the commentary? Read the translation of the text. You read the Bhagavad Gita and leave the commentary of Swami Chidbhananda aside. Just read the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Just read the Vedas as it is. Ignore the commentary. Who's telling you to read the commentary? I never read the commentary. I just read the verse and that's it. And then I make my own thoughts. You don't have to read the commentary. You can understand the chronology, everything, and still avoid the commentary. That's what I'm trying to tell you. What did I like and dislike this week? Well, I don't know, man. There are so many things. Religion should not be allowed to make truth moral claims since their texts are subject to interpretations. Who's going to stop them? My question to you is that they're going to do it whether you like it or not. Do I think Rajiv Malhotra uses postmodern concepts? He does allude to post-colonialism many times, but I don't think so he uses it all the time. I actually would give him credit there. I think a lot of other people do that. I think Malhotra ji doesn't do that. He talks about it, but he doesn't do it. He talks about it, he mentions it. I still believe his book Being Different was an excellent book. What is post-colonialism? Post-colonialism is basically an ideology which was started by this gentleman called Edward Said, where he basically said that, so it stems from this idea of postmodernism, which says that language is even science, everything. So postmodernism says there are meta narratives, and these meta narratives are decided by the ones who are in power, and the ones who are in power dominate everything. Science is a meta narrative, Marxism is a meta narrative. So instead of having one meta narratives, should have mini narratives. And when you have mini narratives, so everybody can look at their culture, their religion, their society from their own unique prism. But the problem with that is, at the piece of on the face of it, you'll be like, wow, brilliant idea, but it leads to nihilism. Because if there is no truth, then basically you just lead to a nihilistic place. So there has to be some objective standard. The problem with post-colonialism and many of these things that Edward Said and these people used were, there were no objective standards. Like basically everything that Islam did was okay. So he did it for Islam. Now a lot of people are doing it. There are post-colonial scholars and postmodern scholars in India also, very famous ones like Gayatri Spivak and Homi Bhabha, and these people are very famous. They are very known in postmodern circles. So if you want to read them, you can. I did do a podcast. You can go on. Kya naam hai unka, yaar? I forgot the name now. I was invited to Vichar Manthan's fireside conversation, where I actually did explain postmodernism. Don't you think all religions are imperfect approximations of objective reality? They're actually very, very imperfect approximations of objective reality. Why are Sanskrit manuscripts not being translated? They are. I mean, there are so many. We need so much more money. And also, nobody is interested. And when people are interested, like, it's so disappointing that the Murtis went to Pollock, again, who's a Marxist. So he has his own lens. I think he should have given it to traditional Pandits in India, and they should have translated. There are very good Sanskrit scholars in India, but for some odd reason, we trust the Gora doing our bit than our own people. Where did I get the term booga booga? I don't know, man. I've been using it for a decade now. I just must have heard somewhere. I don't know. Best translation for Manusmriti, please. So do one thing. Go and tell the religious people to tell you the best translation. You see what happens. I have an ex-Muslim friend who is totally turned off by the ex-Muslims of YouTube and doesn't want to become like them. He watches your show. What advice would you give to him? First of all, leave the ex-Muslim tag. You can just be an atheist or a disbeliever or a skeptic. You can just live your life normally, man, just like any other disbeliever. Just don't care. Just move on. If somebody asks you your opinion on religion, you say it's booga booga and you move on. Otherwise, don't poke the bear. Live your life happily. I'm not saying you can't call yourself an ex-Muslim if you want to call yourself one. And I'm sure there is a need and place for ex-Muslims too. But my point is, I don't get it. I don't get if you're an ex of something. Like there is no positive doctrine there. It's like a negation. Again, I don't understand negations. Beyond a point, it makes no sense to me. Can I make a public series on Manusmriti, please? No. I'm going to do it behind a paywall. Once I'm done with the Ramayana, the next 3 books that we're going to be reading are Manu, Yajnavalkya, and Parshara Smriti. So nope, I'm not going to make it public. It's going to be behind a paywall. So anybody who wants to come and see those things, it will be behind a paywall. Which translation of the Veda would I recommend? But Stephanie, which one is that? यार अभी मैंने निकाली थी वो Stephanie क्या नाम है उसका? उनको नाम याद नहीं रहते हैं. Jameson. Griffith is not a good translation, although it was a very good attempt for that time. Griffith was a very good attempt for that time, but obviously Griffith has used many wrong words in many contexts. So, and to his credit, if you read the footnotes of Griffith, in many cases he has admitted also that some places he has made a mistake. So I would give him credit for that. But see, if you want to, Stephanie W. Jameson and P. Bereton, that is there. You can use that translation of the Rig Veda. The Arya Samaj Rig Veda translation is actually, honestly, very bad. The Hindi one that I have, I've read it. It's actually a very bad translation. So I don't know if I would recommend that or I should recommend that. I don't know. Sandeep has asked, any plans for a podcast with Rajiv Malhotra? No. No, Sandeep. As of now, there are no plans. Okay, figures in religious texts may have been real, but like Homer did to the Greek kings' warlords, they are often all these magical stories. I'm willing to accept that there could be a historical Rama and a historical Krishna, but the whole premise isn't Hinduism not a history-centric religion itself? That doesn't mean we should not have a Ram temple or a Krishna Janmabhoomi thing. We should have it. But my point is that history centrism is not a thing of Hinduism, right? It is other religions. That's my whole point. See, again, there we go. Sankhya Darshan and Vaisheshik Darshan is all about science. Have you read the Sankhya Karika? Have you read it? I'll give it to you. Okay. This is the Sankhya Karika right here. Where did it go? Yeah. This is the Sankhya Karika. Right? Here. Tell me what science is there in this. Look, there are philosophical concepts. There might be metaphysics in it. It is not actual science. It is not gone through a method. You guys mix things up. I mean, what do you want? Or, you know, you can read this, right? Sankhya Karika of Ishwar Krishna. 2 translations. How about that? One this, Vachaspati Mishra, one Ishwar Krishna. Why don't you read these 2 and tell me? Why don't you do that? See, you guys don't get it. This is the problem. It's very disappointing. Wait, where did it go? I'm sorry. It would be interesting to see an Arya Samaji in your podcast. Love to see your views on Arya Samaj and how it became less relevant post-independence. If you have any Arya Samajis, please put me on to them. I mean, I'm actually kind of raised in Arya Samaji house. So, yeah. I should set up a school of Cārvāka thought in India. मैं बाबा बन जाऊं? काम नहीं है मेरे को और कोई. This I intend to do. I do intend to write my treatise on Neo Cārvāka. I do actually. Why are people so concerned about ex-Muslims? I don't know. Ask the people who are. Uh, Albert Camus, yes. Absurdist philosophies, very little. Hmm. Any thoughts on unlock 5 guidelines here in Maharashtra? My thoughts are that it's just useless. The government is now at a stage where the government wants to tell you that देखो हम कुछ कर रहे हैं. They pretend to do things when they actually do nothing, and that's about it. It's a load of rubbish. So that's my answer, my dear friend. So that's my answer. We should just open things up and let people have their own decisions now. Absolutely. Ramanujan came up. I know he said that the Ma came in my dreams and gave me those answers, but at the end of the day, he formulated his theorems based on some axioms of math. He put them down on a piece of paper. He did the backward integration. Eventually, had to do it, right? It was not like everything came to him. Yeah, I'm not saying that scientists are automatons. They can get inspired by philosophical thoughts in religion, but at the end of the day, for something to become scientific, it has to follow that scientific method. And I'm not saying that ancient Indians were not scientific. Shustrut was, Aryabhatta was, the Kerala school of mathematics, those religious people, they were. Religion is not scientific. Individuals are scientific. There is a scientific method. That's what I'm trying to say. Eh? Everything from physics, architectures are invented by Islamic scholars and they were stolen by. See, everybody says they have invented everything. You just listen to them and have fun. Why is Osho most controversial? I don't know. I will write a book. I intend to write a book. Where do you see India in coming years? Will Indic thought survive? I think Indic thought is doing very well. There is a resurgence. India in the next 10 to 12 years hopefully will be a middle income country. That's what matters to me the most. Religion is hope plus hallucination. I don't agree. Religion is a lot more than that. I think it's the safest meme out there. You have to understand it is the oldest meme that has survived. It is in a very weird way the one meme that keeps society together. That's why I get very worried when atheists say, we should destroy the entire edifice of religion. I am not that kind of a disbeliever. I say gradualism. Gradually change all the claims that make no sense and keep the structure of religion around. Gradualism is the way, not destruction. I'm not that kind of a disbeliever. How to become an ex-atheist? Stop being an atheist, I guess. What kind of a question is this? It's time that Rajiv Malhotra faces an actual Cārvāka. You do realize Rajiv Malhotra actually knows me, right? I've worked with him for 5 years. You guys should realize that. I actually know Rajiv Malhotra. Hmm. लो जी शाउट आउट दे दो कुशल भाई आर्यांश ये लो आपको शाउट आउट दे दिया Get Nityananda Mishra to compose a few verses of नित्यानंद मिश्रा इज अ सीरियस स्कॉलर. उसका और कोई काम नहीं है बेचारे को, इसके पीछे लगा दूं मैं. He's a serious scholar. What is wrong with you people? How did a religion come into existence? You should read Pascal Boyer on his views on religion. That's a good book. You'll get a lot of answers there. From an evolutionary perspective, how did religion come up? Don't you think Arnab and Republic Bharat are harming our cause in general? पहले ये बताओ, what is our cause? Second, how is Arnab harming it? Arnab is just an infotainment or misinfotainment, whatever you want to call it. Why do you guys so good? Oh, ना देखो ना यार उसको. Schopenhauer, yes, he was influenced by Buddhism and also a little bit of Upanishads. And Schopenhauer does mention it in his books. Okay, all the book recommendation messages are going to be ignored because I have done it so many times. And stop spamming my damn timeline with book recommendations. Have you seen that episode of South Park with Richard Dawkins? Does that apply to Armin? I have no clue. I'm sorry. I can't answer. If you're not for religion but for humanity, I mean, what does that even mean? I'm sorry to say. I know you mean well, but these are those things that I call fluffy lines that mean nothing. Like, I believe in live and let live. Obviously, everybody, I mean, okay. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi does not believe in live and let live. You believe in humanity. What is humanity? What is your code? I mean, you believe in a set of rules, right? So that's what it is. Upper caste robots will prevail. That's funny. Oh god. Oh god. That was a good one. I have to give it to you. Naturalism didn't survive in India. I don't know. I think the Indian way was never deny the natural reality. The Indian way was, I think, Advaita had a deep influence on most philosophies in India. So it's not like Advaita denies the Laukic realm. A lot of people, neo-Advaitins, have actually done a very bad job of explaining Advaita also. They've messed up. Okay, I think I can wrap it up. If you have any last few questions, please ask now. Otherwise, I'll wrap it up. I'm more than happy I can wrap it up. Usually, I have to take an hour and 35 minutes or something. But looks like I can wrap it up at a far earlier out today. What about digestion of Indic philosophical systems in various academic streams without proper credit? This is a very good point. I have a huge problem with this. I believe if you give the source credit, you actually learn more. So you should give the source credit. And I have seen this dirty business happening a lot of times. It's very petty. I agree, Anand. I have come to feel that if we destroy all religion, even the mostly innocuous and peaceful ones, then more aggressive and authoritarian ideologies will come out of that world. I agree. Look at wokeism. What a horrible ideology. So much for religion being destroyed. What are the things that I disagree with Ashish Dhar? Well, I think very soon Ashish and I, maybe in a month or two, we will have a chat. So we'll have a chat on my podcast. I'll give Ashish I think I'm being unfair if I don't let Ashish come and express his views. I think Ashish should get the platform and he has every right to have his views, and I have every right to disagree with Ashish, but I should only I should give him that chance to explain himself. So that way we'll have a great discussion. What are my views on race and IQ? Like some race has high IQ. I think it's the most useless thing to study. Even if it is scientifically true, I'm not an expert. It is very useless. What are my thoughts on Jordan Peterson and his view on religions? See, I think, like Eric Weinstein says, he's a very intelligent thinker until he does the Jesus smuggling. That's when the problem starts, when he smuggles in Jesus. India needs communism. No, you need to be blocked now. Okay, see, this is another problem. Way of life. I mean, way of life. Kya? Even a dog has a way of life. Even a cat has a way of life. Even Bin Laden had a way of life. See, these are just fluffy words. They mean nothing. You have to go beyond that. भाई काम धंधा ठीक चल रहा है नहीं. What is my favorite deity? Rama or Shiva? I would be biased to Sri Ram. I don't know. I guess since my childhood, even my political thoughts were shaped by the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. So I have a bias to Sri Ram. I'll be very honest. Did Vedanta have a negative effect on naturalism in India, as some thinkers think? So I don't believe. I think it's overblown by Western thinkers, and they have this thing because they always say, "Oh, Indian systems are so fatalistic because they have this karma theory, and because of this karma theory, fatalism ho jata hai, ye ho jata hai, wo ho jata hai." It's a load of rubbish. I don't believe in that. It's just that we have a lot of our texts destroyed. We just don't see. You have to understand. Naturalism, it's not like if you're a Vedantin, you can't believe in physical reality and you can't live your life based on principles of physics and biology. The only religion where there is no problem with evolution and religion is actually Hinduism. Tell me one more religion where you can reconcile the both. Only Hinduism you can. You leave ISKCON aside, they are the exception to the rule. Most Hindu schools don't have a problem with evolution other than ISKCON. ISKCON has a problem with evolution. I wonder why. Maybe they started in America. They had some influence of the Christians over there. I don't get it. रेस्टोरेंट्स खुल गए नहीं 5 तारीख से खुलने वाले हैं सब लोग ऐसे रेस्टोरेंट्स के बाहर है ना ऐसे ऐसे खड़े होंगे ऐसे दरवाजे खुले सारे अंदर जाएंगे खाना खाने को. How do you view the concept of karma? Is there any logic behind it? Okay, I don't believe that there is some divine bank account where every activity you do in this life is somehow going to affect your another birth, because in my view there is no proof that there is another life or another birth. If by karma you mean every action will have a reaction, then I'm willing to buy that. But in this life, if you are going to extend it and go into some weird second life, birth, another birth, a birth after that birth, then after that another birth, no, I'm not. So I'm being very honest. I don't believe in reincarnation and rebirth. So yeah. What happened to our texts? Destruction or carelessness? Apathy towards preservation? No, 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 no. Islam happened to our texts. That's what happened to our texts. I mean, are you really asking this question? They destroyed millions of our books. They only said that. We don't even have to go to any other source. They say that. We destroyed this library. We destroyed that library. Because they had a brutal impact on our society. The British, too, they started reading our texts, and actually, thanks to them, we found out a lot of things in a very weird way. Albeit they were very negative to us, but at least they were reading us. Muslims, too, destroyed our libraries. The Islamic invasion of India was bad. Okay, your professor was literally comparing nativist movements from Canada with Periyar style anti-Brahmin movements in India. Periyar wanted to kill Brahmins, wanted to break idols. What has that got to do with? Who is this professor of yours? That professor needs therapy. Oh. Do you think Hinduism is going to survive for, let's say, 100 years? Or are we going to lose it? I think Hinduism is going to survive for thousands of years. It's not going anywhere. If I had to choose between rebirth and moksha, what will you choose? That's a very good question. What do I get if I get moksha? First answer that, then I can answer. मतलब मोक्ष मिलेगा तो किधर जाके बिठाने वाले हो मेरे को? तो बताओ, फिर मैं आंसर दूंगा. Can I talk about transgeneration trauma with Ashish? Sure. Please answer my question. Well, if you would have used the super chat, I would have answered it. Otherwise, it's my choice. If there was no Islam, do you think Middle East culture would have mirrored Hinduism? I don't know. It's very hard to say. Very hard. I don't know. I mean, what was there before Islam came in Middle Eastern societies? What kind of pagan culture was there? What paganism meant to them? It's so hard. There are so many ifs and buts in that scenario. You just don't know, right? And so look at it from a butterfly effect point of view. Like one flapping of the wing of a butterfly causes so many significant changes in the weather. So these things of what if this would not have happened historically or that would not have happened historically. It's very hard to answer these questions. I mean, honestly, I don't know. Do we really need population control? We have seen Islamists on Twitter discuss how they are going to establish religious authority in your. Listen, you don't need a population control bill because, again, whether you like it or not, laws are not going to be proportionately and symmetrically followed. So please get real. What you need is secularism of the most brutal quality. Educate people, make them less religious, make them more modern. Automatically their total fertility rates are going to drop down. And for a change, do some data reading. Check the birth rates of Muslims in India year after year. You might get over your paranoia, I think. All right, I guess it's time now. All right, let's wrap things up. Okay, guys, so once again, thanks a lot for all the support. As always, before I wrap things up, I want to personally thank each and every one of you who has been supporting this podcast. Some have been supporting this podcast for now more than 2 years. So thanks to all of you. I appreciate all the nice things that you guys do. Next month, I'll try to talk about something even more interesting. And as you guys know, once again, to remind you, you can become a member on YouTube, or you can go and Patreon and become a subscriber on Patreon. Good, nobody asked me about the t-shirts because I've not done the sampling of the t-shirts. I have the designs ready, but I have not just had the time to basically, do some sampling, take some photos, put them up online, make changes to the what you call website where you can buy the t-shirts. I'm going to do it slowly. I have my exams till the 15th, so after the 15th, maybe hopefully either in the month of November or maximum by December, t-shirts will be out. And on that note, I'll say goodbye to you guys. Namaste. Take care.